Ok, 4h47 da manhã, terça-feira. E agora que a gente já tomou banho, tá se aprontando para dormir. Daqui umas 3, 4 horas é pra gente estar de pé até começando a amanhecer já. Esse é o nosso quarto. 9 da manhã. Visão, legal. Banheiro. 2 camas. Serjão já tá deitado. O dia vai ser intenso.
What will attract your eyes is the traffic and how we drive in Egypt. Driving has, as you can see, no rules. Last night I talked about the top 10 most asked questions or the new 10 commandments of Egypt. One of them is not to take a drive in Egypt. Unless you have those high scores of physics and mathematics, if you can calculate distance versus velocity versus mass versus stuff. So people here do not stop when somebody crosses the street. They slow down. And there's this eye contact between the pedestrians and the drivers. They don't stop, not the complete stop. You can check this out, somebody crossing the street and they would follow certain rules. First one is keep an eye on the driver. Number 2 is never go back. Like, don't even think about going back. Either stop where you are or keep running the other way. If you decide to change your mind, this is how accidents happen. Surprisingly, we don't have many accidents here. With all the chaos that we have in the driving system, before this revolution, things were a little bit better. Things got a little bit better. We had those speed traps and cameras all over highways, but when this started, the people busted them all. People like to be free people in a free country. Sundays on the 4th, so a huge network of transportation. For 2.5 or 25 million people going from one place to another, not to mention those who do not live in the capital but they work in the capital, so there is this domestic immigration every day from and to.
Pessoal, estamos aqui na frente das pirâmides do Egito. Olha lá. Aqui tá o grupinho de brasileiro, tá os nossos amigos, os ônibus. E ali estão as pirâmides. A gente vai entrar de ônibus até lá. O rapaz falou que se a gente for andando dá 1 hora de caminhada em volta da pirâmide maior, então é muito grande. Já estamos entrando lá, hein? E vamos entrar lá dentro da pirâmide. Só que não pode filmar. Your ticket. Olha que bonito.
88 gods and goddesses. Some of them were chief, like were very famous. Main ones like Ra, the sun disk, the very famous one, was the chief god of the Old Kingdom. That changed in the Middle Kingdom into Amun. And then in the New Kingdom, perhaps to make everybody happy, they turned that into Amun-Ra, a combination of the two gods together. But there was also Khnum. Khnum was the potter, not Harry Potter, but the potter who was in charge of making babies. They imagine the potter making babies of clay. We're going to see the temple of Queen Hatshepsut in the west bank of the Nile, on the west bank, and there is a recorded scene in one of the walls showing God Khnum on kicking the wheel, making her out of clay as a baby. So Khnum was the one who used to make little babies out of clay. So obviously he was the king's favorite god, which is why he called his name Khnum Hu Efwi, which means God Khnum protects me. So Khnum was the one in charge of protecting the king. But he's Egyptian, his Greek name is Cheops. If you think Cheops is easier, go for it. Anyway, the king here started the first and greatest pyramid ever. This was not the beginning. You're looking at the peak now. This was not the beginning, but in the beginning they wanted a simple tomb. The simple tomb was as simple as a simple pit in the ground, where they lay down the dead in a basket or a casket made of papyrus, just a simple one, but the scavengers would eat the flesh of the mummy. So they needed to develop the tomb from a pit into a pit that would lead into a long shaft and a burial chamber underneath. And then they would cover the entrance with like a gravestone. The proper term is mastaba. It's like a bench. A king from the 3rd dynasty from the Old Kingdom in 2600 BC. His name was Zoser, and he had a genius architect. His name was Imhotep. Supposedly the famous one from the Hollywood movie The Mummy. But he's... Ladies and gentlemen, you're looking at one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Not just one of the 7 wonders, but the only one that's still standing. The other 7 wonders all fell apart. Out of the 7, Egypt had 2. The Great Pyramid at Giza and the Lighthouse in Alexandria. But that also came down. So the only one that's still standing is the Great Pyramid of Giza. This pyramid alone occupies an area of 13 acres. So the base of this pyramid occupies an area of 13 acres. Each one of the 4 sides of the square base is 220 meters long. The height of the pyramid when it was first finished was 146 meters. That's about 496 feet high. The pyramid is composed of 2.3 million blocks of stones. So 2.3 million blocks of stones of this size. When you approach the pyramid, you can see this lady walking by the pyramid. The stone is up to her head. So these are huge stones, not small ones. The average weight is 3 tons. Some of those stones are up to 80 tons, like the stones of the ceiling of the burial chamber. And here we have to differentiate between 3 types of stones. The first one is the building stone that looks brownish. There's also the casing stone that's mostly taken out, but there is one at the base that you can still see. One of the casing stones, the one that looks white and shiny. The one at the bottom. You see the entrance? Right at the bottom there is a long stone that looks wider than the other stones. This is one of the casing stones. The one of few stones survived. The stones were taken off, recycled, reused probably. So, 2 types of stones. One is the building stone, and this one we got from the area here. The casing stones were brought from a place known as Tarao, or the mine, and that's like 15 kilometers south of here. There's also granite, and granite was used for casing the walls of the burial chamber and for the ceiling. Granite is only found in Aswan, and that's about 1,000 kilometers south of here. So they went all the way to Aswan, all the way up to Aswan, about 1,000 kilometers. They went to the granite quarry, and granite is a super hard stone to work with, not to mention that we're talking about 2300 BC. That's like 4,300 years ago that they went all the way down to Aswan. With simple tools they managed to cut those pieces of granite and then transport it all the way on papyrus boats, all the way to Giza during the flood time.
Estamos aqui nas pirâmides do Egito.
Yes, right there.
Estamos aqui nas pirâmides do Egito. Como vocês podem ver lá no fundo. Tira o chapéu. E todo esse pessoal que a gente vai mostrar aqui agora, eles ficam aqui. Ficam os vendedores aqui tentando fazer você dar a volta no camelo, vender bugiganga, um monte de coisa.
Tá filmando aí, ó?
Yeah. Essa
E aí,
é a
Joel?
Eu fiquei boba que disse que o Michael Jackson tinha 20 anos.
A Ellen, branca, de protetor solar, porque está muito quente.
Mas ó, o Denilson já tá neguinho, você viu?
Interessantes as histórias das pirâmides. Pirâmide menor são das esposas e filhas.
To the park. This is where we start 2 options. Option A, you can join us as we will walk all the way down to the Sphinx from those trees at the entrance, passing by those seats. Those are the seats of the night show known as the Sound of Light show. And then we will walk all the way down to the Valley Temple of the King, which is this building off to your right side. Walk through it and up the causeway as you see those pictures taking some close-ups of the Sphinx. That's option A. Option A is to walk all the way down all the way back up and all the way to the best part that's on your right side. If you look.
Pra você poder entrar.
Que da hora.
Agora você vai dar tipo portura. Agora você vai usar o celular. Daqui eu vou sair com algum estado.
Okay, who would like to remain on the bus and who would like to join us all the way down? Okay.
I want to
A gente vai andar só nesse trajeto lá.
There's no admission fees to see the pyramid and to see these things. I mean.
E agora estamos indo entrar na esfinge. Todas as mulheres aqui usam esse negócio na cabeça, né? O tamanho dessas pedras. Olha só, para ter noção do tamanho das pedras. Muito grande. Ali atrás, a esfinge. Agora eu vou correr porque eu estou para trás de todo mundo.
To the foot of the pyramid, known as the mortuary temple. Connecting the two temples is what we call the causeway. So what's the function of the Valley Temple where we are now? This temple was used once upon a time to mummify the dead king, the body of King Khafre. Mummification took place in 70 days. So the best quality mummification was the one that was performed in 70 long days. It starts with taking the intestines out through a small incision. Like they would cut the left part of the abdomen, the left side, and take the intestines out. Somebody tell me why the left part and not the other part? Why this part and not this one here?
Heart. The heart?
The heart is up here. But I mean, this part has more organs than this part. This part has the appendix and it has more stuff. So they would use the other part. Through a small incision, they would move 4 organs out to speed up the process of dehydration. They would take the stomach out, they would take the intestines out, as well as the liver and the lungs, the juicy part. They would put them in separate containers, known as the canopic jars. They had many implements for the job, like knives, something like scissors, clippers, and stuff to ensure that they can do the process nice and easy. They would have this long metal implement that curves up the top like a metal hook. Only they didn't have metal at that time, but they would use brass instead and copper. They would stick it up the nose through the nostril. They would push it deeper into the brains, squish the brains, and then suck the brain out through the nostril. Then they would stuff the skull with different detergents like herbs and natural stuff.
It's lunchtime.
A lot of activity.
It's lunchtime.
It's lunchtime. It's about time. And then they would soak the whole body in salt, some crystal salt type known as natron salt, only found in Egypt in a valley known as the Natron Valley, like crystal salt. Have you ever attended a wedding where the people would, like relatives of friends, would spray rice on the bride and the groom? The tradition started with salt. Salt was so expensive and so important at that time. The mummification salt, it's not like table salt. So using this salt on the bride and the groom means you're wishing them a happy and eternal life. But of course, if you couldn't afford salt, because salt was so expensive, you would use rice instead. So the process took 70 days, and only a king would have a 70-day mummification. Even Jacob himself did not have a 70-day mummification, as well as Joseph. Only the king of Egypt would have the 70-day mummification process. We're here to see how the temple, the Valley Temple, developed from a simple temple like the temple you can see now, that's made of limestone and covered and cased in granite, those heavy blocks of stones, into the elaborate temples that we get to see in Luxor, like Luxor Temple and Karnak temples. In the Old Kingdom, they would have the temples as part of the complex. In the New Kingdom, they would have a separate building for those who have the temple on the west bank of the Nile. They would have two buildings. Like in the New Kingdom, they would have the tomb of the Valley of the Kings. The New Valley would have all the valleys of the New Kingdom. And they would have
When you have these two paws, in between there is an inscription, and this inscription about his dream, when he justified that he, even though he was the Tutmos IV, he was not the firstborn, but still he has the right to be the king. And this is one of the very important pieces for, to make the 15th century Exodus also. Therefore, this is very important inscription over there about Tutmosis. Okay. Probably the king of the pharaoh of the Exodus. Okay.
Father of the king.
Did you just say this?
Yeah, he was the pharaoh of the Exodus. Yes, he was like the most famous Tutmosis III, and he. Yeah, this is the inscription.
But he didn't have it built.
This is a woman. Well, this is a combination. It's a head and his feet and his body. This is what it's called. Sorry, he wasn't the first one. He was not. And so he was not entitled to the... Exactly, he was not entitled. But then he was the pharaoh, the pharaoh of the Exodus. And it is
Just like when you have your father away on business, you have more freedom until he comes back. So once we have a president again, things will definitely change and get back to normal. Okay, we're about 30 minutes away from the Egyptian Museum. So if you would like to take a nap, please help yourself. If you have any questions, please shoot. If you're still thinking about the cows, chickens, and pigs, help yourself. And give me the answer once you have it.
Nephew. Is that the answer?
Whose nephew?
Uma pedreira daqui. Umas construções.
Part of the Nile. There is an island in the middle of the Nile that has a beautiful presentation showing how Egyptians lived like.
Essa pobreza aqui.
Muslims and Christians lived together. Somebody asked me if we have special districts for Muslims and others for Christians. And the answer is no. And here is the perfect example. On this island, to the right side, you get to see a mosque and a church across from one another, not even 20 meters apart. You can, from this point.
Eu vou te falar que aqui não tem problema com cristãos, muçulmanos, e ali está uma igreja católica. Ali está uma igreja católica. Ele falou que a menos de 20 metros tem uma mesquita. O trânsito aqui é loucura. Eles só atravessam no meio da rua, passa cruzando. A gente acabou de passar uma escola e as crianças cruzando no meio da rua, o ônibus buzinando e passando. É uma loucura o trânsito. Muito perigoso, muito bagunçado.
Tips.
I have no... Do you have anything? I have nothing but tips.
If she gives the recipe, I give the tip.
شكرا